I think often women have been pitted against each other. And it's like, how do you support women and the women sharing their voices, even when we don't agree with them? I think one of the things I love about the Beguine community, we must learn to gather and support the differences and honor all the voices.
Is there anything more misunderstood in history than magic? Here's what your history classes conveniently skipped. The world was not built by logic and reason alone. It was built by something much more ancient.
The hidden history of magic tells the true stories of the astrologer in the White House, the intuitive who sat alongside Gilded Age tycoons, and the black ops government agencies that have used mediums to talk to aliens since the 30s.
These moments often get covered up, sidelined, or buried because they prove something. Magic is not fringe. It's used every day.
Because while we've been trained to trust everything but our own intuition, the people in power never stop consulting the stars. They know something we've been taught to forget. Magic is real, and we have access to it.
I'm Rhiannon Hauk.
And I'm Erin Bagwell.
We are psychics, witches, mothers, and storytellers ready to break down history's best-kept secrets.
Welcome to the hidden history of magic.
Today on the show, we are talking about the medieval order of women known as the Beguines.
We talk about their magic, their money, and why their legacy, which includes mystics like Marguerite Porete, leaves us questioning the origins of the witch.
Trigger warning, this conversation includes discussions of sexual violence and witch persecution, so please take care while listening.
Rebecca Auman, welcome to the Hidden History of Magic.
Thank you so much.
We are so excited to have you. Rebecca is the host of Voices in the River podcast. And I will also say Rebecca helped me come out of the broom closet many moons ago by inspiring me with her gorgeous podcast about witches and magic. And I'm so excited to have you here today to nerd out about one of my favorite spiritual topics, the Beguines. Rebecca, have you ever heard about the Beguines before our conversation here?
No, not until you sent me the email. Well, I always say about being a witch, you don't become one, you remember you are one. And so I guess for me, it just felt like a remembering.
I also didn't know anything about the Beguines until Erin brought it up as well. And it's one of those things I think we're finding a lot with this podcast too, because we're very fascinated by mystical, magical. They happen to be women the most that are erased from the stories. And so finding out about this group of magical, mystical, powerful, free women was also really exciting to dive into this research.
I think women are really powerful when they gather. I mean, we are powerful in our own selves. And when we gather as a group, I do feel like the mysticism, the mystery, the power amplifies. And that's what I love about the Beguines.
I love it. Rhiannon, should we set the scene?
Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1310. You're walking safely through your tiny village commune of women. You pass by the lavender garden on your way to the morning prayers in the non-denominational church, where women's images and sculptures adorn the space, and your fellow Beguine leads the service. With some of the worst weather the world had ever seen, wool is the fabric of choice for your modest attire during what's known as the Little Ice Age. In fact, it was so cold that the Thames River in London froze over so thickly that people had little bonfires on it. And back in America, Native communities lived uninterrupted, vibrant, pre-colonial lives of growth and prosperity, trading jade and cacao and building temples.
Meanwhile, Paris was booming with a population of almost 200,000. However, heretics beware. Marguerite Porete, a mystic in the order known as the Beguines, is being burned at the stake for refusing to shelve her explosive spiritual book of poetry called The Mirror of Simple Souls. However, that doesn't stop the book from exploding in popularity. After Marguerite's death, it's published in over 5 different languages by hand and known today as one of the seminal works of medieval spiritual literature. Ooh, I love being kind of dropped into a safe village. What a nice place to start. I mean, I think one of the things that really is fascinating about the Beguines is, just to give a little backstory, they were in France, Belgium, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Hungary, Switzerland, Luxembourg, Poland, and England. These were groups and communities of women who were in a they might have been sexual, a secular movement of spirituality that communed together in groups. They could live in houses of 2 people to 12 people and in little villages of up to 2,000. And so imagine being kind of in a location, a physical place that is just run by women, that is led by women. The rules are created by women. Every Beguine little commune had a church, and inside that church were visuals of women. I mean, to think about it today is actually quite astonishing.
And this was happening in medieval Europe. At the time, feudalism was dying. It was cracking. It was on its way out. So imagine a system. The only way of life that these people knew was cracking and falling apart. And because of that, it kind of opened up this space for a new society structure to show up. Now, it did include what we're dealing with today a little bit. It made space for like power struggles between the Pope and King Philip of France, but also at the same time, these women were able to start building houses and taking temporary vows, I guess, technically, because you could come and go as you pleased into these beguinage, where they were houses where people could stay. And some of these houses were, you're talking about the beautiful villages, but some of these houses in the cities were like 1,000 women living together.
Well, and I do think now we are planting seeds for the rise of the matriarchy, where thousands of women will come together in evolution and revolution. But of course, you see the rise of the patriarchy, sort of the last hurrah embodied in some of our leaders. So it's very applicable, I think.
Yeah, Rhiannon and I were talking yesterday, kind of going through our research, and we were saying that this, even though this is the furthest we've gone back in history so far, it feels like the most resonant because also, to Rhiannon, to your point, the feudalism was ending, money was being introduced. So all of these people who had bartered and traded and kind of knew their social structure, things were changing, and poor working class people were getting left behind, and which is one of the reasons the Beguines became so popular. I mean, they weren't just women who got together and prayed in a chapel. They ran hospitals. They were nurses. They taught people to read and write. They were really pillars of their community, and to much disdain of the church. I mean, sometimes royals and regals and people in power would want Beguines to come into their communities to make them better, but sometimes they fought them for power and for land, and also because they were scared of them. I mean, we're talking about, we're kind of envisioning these women as like little nuns, but they were also mystics. They healed with hands, they levitated, they did readings, what we would call readings today. I mean, these were mystical women who had spiritual power.
Well, it's also kind of tale as old as time, where they wanted the women, to come in and feed the poor and make clothing. Like, you could do your little silk work, you can make lace, sell your little lace. But then the moment that you tried to do, preach, that was a big no.
Yeah, don't use your voice. Don't tell us what you think. Don't tell us the truth.
Right. Well, and I heard one recounting of it where, because the Beguines, they would copy books, which was the form of publishing back then. They would translate the Bible from Latin to French, which was also no. You can't, the Bible had to be in Latin, because then you had to go to church, because the priest would translate it for you. And they were the only way to know the word of God. And so all of a sudden, these Beguines would come into the church in these villages where they were invited, and they would be bored because they already knew what the priest was going to say, because they already read that part of the Bible. And that became a huge problem too.
Yeah, they were so into preaching that in France specifically, in order for preachers to be able to be approved for a church, they had to go through the Beguines. They were like the first level. And if
Oh,
they were
wow.
bored or uninterested, like the preaching was so important to them to be able to share these stories in a way that felt fresh and new. And not only would they translate them, but they would also act them out as plays. Like they really wanted the scriptures to feel immersive and fun. And, music was also a big part of their church services. They would dance. Like in the beginning, they would all just get together and let the music move them before they felt quiet enough to start to pray. Like their views on interpreting different pieces of religion were so fascinating. And I also like this idea of them writing the books. They didn't just write, the Bible, they wrote down their own books. I mean, these were women who were poets and musicians. And I love this idea of them kind of making their own prayer books, channeling their own words to be inspired by, and then convents would take them and hide them away. So we have kind of this lineage too of the church working together, the women of the church working together to protect each other's stories.
Yeah. Well, and we need to, I believe, return to that, to music and dancing and gathering and poetry. We are in this place where we believe that there has to be an intercessory between us and God. And it sounds like the Beguines really understood that they were the divine. We are the divine, and we don't need anyone between us.
Exactly. Oh, I love it so much. And something that I think is really important to note here is that they were spiritual people. They did take a vow to God and a vow to service, and they didn't take a vow of poverty. That's why they had all this property, because people would become a Beguine and they would bring their house that they had inherited or bring whatever property they had. And then at one point, they, as a group, as a collective, because there were so many of them, at one point, get this, there were 1 million Beguines across Europe, which is like insane. And with their collective power, they ended up suing one of the guilds because they were craftspeople. They did loom work and lace work, and silk work was their like bread and butter. They sued the guild and they got to own the equipment outright, the loom outright. And so they made more money and they had more property and they had more assets, and they were really smart with their money, which also meant that they didn't have to rely on anyone outside of them.
Well, that was one of their like secret powers too, because a couple of times the church approached them. It was like, either become part of a church or become your own church. And they were like, no, we want to pay taxes outright. And so politicians and people in the communities actually respected them because they got money from them. So by being kind of secular and non-denominational, they were able to kind of use their finances however they saw fit. And when the church also would come for them, accuse them of being witches in some instances, they could afford lawyers. And so these women were really protected financially, which was cool, and something we don't hear a lot about for women of that time.
What badasses.
Yeah. We always hear the like Jane Eyres or whatever, where it's like, oh, I've got to marry. I don't want to, but I have to. And so this is like such an amazing counter narrative.
And it's been hidden. How did you come to find it, Erin?
Actually, so I follow a gal named Isabella Baham, and she is a priestess on Instagram. I'll link her in the show notes below. But her and I were talking about witches, and she was like, you've got to learn about the Beguines. You've got to learn about kind of the secret society of women who protected each other's spiritual texts. And it's interesting because the more I learn about them, the more I'm convinced that like these women were the original witches. This is my theory, Rebecca, and you can tell me what you think. But I think we have this narrative that the witch is like isolated and hated by her community. And, we have all this negative connotation. I think these women were it. I think they gathered in community. They were financially successful. They ran their own institutions. They were their own deities. They knew their own divinity. I think in a lot of ways, this story has been hidden because these are the original witches.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I would have to think about, to me, the original witch, for me, is a mist that I can't quite access. So I'd have to think about having them embodied by a group of women, but I like that.
My other conspiracy theory is that because there were over 1 million of them, which I think is bananas, like when you think about it. So we have, we're near Rome, like the Catholics are like freaking out. We have the Inquisition going on. And then all of a sudden you have these women who are just organizing. And because all of these little communes are independently run, okay, there's not like this is the rule of the Beguines. Okay, every organization has their own language. They make up their own rules. They vote their own leaders. They can leave the order if they want. They can come back if they want. You can be married. And so really what we're looking at is the start of like a religion. And so in my brain, I see kind of these Catholic male patriarchy leaders looking at the Beguines going, oh shit. We got to get rid of all these women. We got to burn all their ideas. Like if this catches fire, this is the matriarchy. I mean, to read about what it was like to be inside the gates, to feel safe, to have kids running around at night, like it was unheard of at this time. So I think these are seeds that were planted that are, I think, Rebecca, to your point, starting to grow.
Absolutely. I believe it's written many places. I mean, it is the waking of the witch. We are being called to gather, to be in community, and to start a revolution. Now, whether it will start in my lifetime or not, I don't know. But I do think that we are planting seeds for the next evolution. And it sounds like they're a wonderful history for people to consider.
Yes. Something that fascinates me about them too, and I'd be very curious about your relationship with this, Rebecca, is before the Beguine became powerful in numbers and, they clearly, you couldn't talk shit about them because what they were doing worked. But before that, Beguine was like a derogatory term that you would call a woman. It was also these beguinages where they stayed were considered a step up from a brothel. Because look at these women who don't want to marry. They don't want to be
we have
nun.
to sexualize women at every turn. I mean, of course,
Of course. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we even call like coming out as a witch, coming out of the broom closet because we hide so much. And so there is something also about the fact that it didn't deter them from living their lives and they still grew in numbers. They still sued people. They still, you know what I mean? They fought for themselves. When we think about the parallel of today, what do you think we can draw or learn, or how would you approach this idea of sometimes witch being a derogatory term or a threat to people?
Well, Erin's heard me say this many times, but to me, a witch is simply a powerful woman. Or as Devin Cole says in her song, a woman in total control of herself. And so part of the reason that I claimed witch was simply to normalize it. And I think if more of us can, and it doesn't have to be a label or an identity, but if more of us can claim who we are, if more of us truly know that we know and we don't second guess ourselves, that we trust ourselves. And then if we gather in community, I think often women have been pitted against each other. And it's like, how do you support women and the women sharing their voices, even when we don't agree with them? Because the way that we've divided women is by having us be, the narrative is we're petty, we're destructive, they're cat fights, we're against each other, we want to claw people down. I think one of the things I love about the Beguine community, we must learn to gather and support the differences. We must learn to gather and honor all the voices. I do some work with horses, and in times of uncertainty, they come closer together. When they feel safe, there's space between the horses. I think now in this time of uncertainty, it's how do we come closer together? And even if we start in our local community, bringing women, small groups of women together, I believe that's the start.
Hi, Erin here. If you've been loving the conversations we're having and you are curious about going deeper into your own story, I highly recommend booking a session with my co-host Rhiannon Hauk. Her soul session stories are unlike anything I've ever experienced. She guides you through your own inner world, helps you uncover patterns, connect the dots, and can actually shift what's been keeping you stuck. I had a reading with Rhiannon about a year ago, and honestly, I think about it all the time. I think of Rhiannon as kind of like the intuitive's intuitive, because she gives you not only a connection to your guides, but this beautiful cosmic blueprint that can really ground you and anchor you on your journey ahead. She also offers 15-minute intuitive sessions if you're looking for something quick and focused, as well as one-on-one mentorship for ongoing support. You can book with her at rhiannonismagic.com/connect or click the link in the show notes below. Trust me, you're going to love your reading with Rhiannon. Okay, now back to the show.
I love that. So many chills.
Yeah.
From this idea of like coming together. I do love how women can be petty. I like, show me your petty. Yeah. Let's bring it out. Women can be villains too.
Oh, absolutely. No. And I don't,
Yeah.
it's so interesting.
No, I'm just kidding.
I just did this reading for this woman. I think we see the high priestess in Tarot as this reverent person in cool blue. And she's very quiet and peaceful. And I just did a journey for a woman to her high priestess, and she was in red and she was quite spicy. And then there's a new Melissa Etheridge song called Divina. And Divina is the Latin word for the divine feminine. Cool. And she's a bartender. And she's like, bartender, pour me a drink. And I'm like, oh, we have made women into these demure, respectful things. It is righteous rage that's going to get us to where we want to go. But we have to do it together. And so how do we keep a seat for the woman who cannot speak for herself, but then also honor all the other voices? But rage, absolutely. I'm not saying we should come together in some spiritual thing. I mean, that's great, but it's okay to hold space for rage.
Yes.
Well, I think we need all of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think sometimes these philosophical ideas too, of everyone bringing their whole selves, everyone bringing their unique selves. When I think about diversity, I think about it like literally as every person is their own frequency. And these are kind of like divine cosmology ideas more than just human stuff, right? Like what is the point of humaning is really at the core of when we come together and letting people freely express who they are and be messy about it and be learning requires mistakes. Learning requires, sometimes people are like flopping on the floor, speaking in tongues, and that's spirituality. Sometimes people are kneeling quietly in prayer, and that's spirituality, and everyone coming together and bringing it, to use like a Beguine image, creating this tapestry. And the more color and the more uniqueness we can bring to it, the more beautiful it is when we step back and look at it as a whole.
And I love the word messy. I mean, magic is messy. Spirituality is messy. And having grown up in a very structured church, and I think religion is very different than spirituality, there's a lot of perfection.
Yes.
Yeah. Rebecca, would you share a little bit? I think it's so interesting that the Beguines chose to be non-denominational. I think to what Rhiannon was also saying, like we get to kind of build the tapestry of what we want and who we are. Can you speak a little bit more to kind of your experience and kind of how the witch kind of led you in a new direction, or how those two things kind of coexisted or didn't exist?
My father was a Methodist minister in the American South, and there was a very structured way to how we practiced our religion. And I had elements of intuition, but because my grandmother had been an intuitive, my mother asked me to shut that down. So I did. But eventually I found my way to an interfaith seminary where they said, the divine is within. It's not out. And it blew my mind. I really didn't understand that. And I didn't understand the structure in which I had grown up had kept me constricted by fear. It really was a structure that marketed sin to sell religion.
Oh,
and to me, spirituality is more, again, this internal knowing that, and this is just for me, not necessarily for other, but really supported by the great mother, the earth. And it's how we tend our garden. I love when you talked about lavender at the beginning. They walk by lavender. Most witches have rosemary by their front door. Yarrow is a good boundary protector. There's so many ways that plant medicine is available to us, and tree medicine, and just connecting with the earth and feeling supported by her, going back to the root of the earth who has always been with us. To me, it's about deep roots and tall branches. And churches are a building. Spiritual practice is about connection.
And I really love this image that you're painting about this like deep roots and the connection to the Mother Earth, because sometimes spirituality, especially on Instagram or the internet, can feel like it's very much about going into the clouds or into the cosmos, when really it's all right here. The fact that we're human at all is a miracle. And, just speaking of plant guardians, I was telling Erin that I felt so called to burn rue ahead of this. It felt like there's like a lot of like earth stuff that wants to be in this space with us. It's really fun.
I kind of think Love and Light is a new age cast on witches. Witches are really comfortable in the dark. They're root workers. They're working with the earth. They're working with plant medicine. They're totally fine in the dark. They're certainly fine to come up and show the path for other people. But I feel like magic without grounding in the earth is not sustainable. And I think it also plays to the God is above, God is outside. Mother Earth is under our feet. She's holding us sweetly. And there are so many women I work with when we do shamanic reset, where you connect your heartbeat with the heartbeat of the mother. And they don't have any support in the universe, in their family. And when they finally connect to the heartbeat of the mother, they can relax for 15 minutes. And you don't need me to do that. You can go out and spread a blanket and lie down on the ground and just ask for Mother Earth to hold you.
I love doing that practice. It's so quiet. My mother died when I was young. And so the idea of being held by a mother, sometimes, I don't know, it's like still a little sensitive to think of just like my ghost mom giving me a hug.
Oh, I know. My mother died when I was young too. And it's very tender for me. I was very tentative about letting the earth hold me. I still, it's a struggle.
Yeah. But there's nothing like the vastness of her support and the vastness of our love. It's a really beautiful practice.
I'm just sitting with that a moment.
Okay. Well, I think something that is what we can dive into is going from the Beguines. So culturally as a whole, they held a lot of space for women to do this thing. Because again, at this time, your options under feudalism were to get married and be,
wife,
the property of your husband, or to join the convent and be the property of the church. And these women paved a third option where they did not have to submit to male authority. And anytime they tried to make it happen legally or whatever, they fought it and were able to survive for a really long time. Now, one of the Beguines that we did want to focus on is Marguerite Porete, who was born in about 1250. The stuff around her birth is a little unclear because, record keeping at the time. But she was born in what is now like modern day Belgium. But as we said at the top of the episode, in 1310, we have the very specific death date, because there are a lot of records against her for her trial during the French Inquisition. She was burned at the stake on June 1st, 1310. And it was specifically because, she was accused of being a Beguine, and she didn't necessarily identify as one, but she was a spiritual woman at the time who lived independently. And there's like so much writing that she was associated with them that we think ultimately she is a Beguine. But she wrote a book called The Mirror of Simple Souls. That's this book of poetry, but really it reminds me of Rumi, the way that it's love letters. It's a conversation between the soul, love, reason, and the church. And it's from the perspective of the soul, and it's really love and reason having this conversation and essentially talking about how God is love and love is God, and that ultimately our soul is moving through these phases of ascension towards annihilation so that we can be one with love again. But ultimately, the purpose of existence is love.
When you were talking, I was looking up Joan of Arc. And so she died in 1431. So you're talking about hundreds of years before Joan. And then wanted to look up Teresa of Avila and Hildegard of Bingen.
I believe Hildegard was a Beguine.
Oh, was she really?
She was, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa of
She
Avila.
also wrote a book.
She was 1582. So these were, maybe both of them were Beguines. I mean, it sounds like the women Christian mystics that I've learned about.
Yes. And even the book, it's really dense, but the fact that it's this like a dialogue style of writing is also pretty advanced for the time. And so the way that she's writing is pretty complex for someone who wasn't necessarily educated. And it feels like this channeled work. Mm-hmm. And something that's really incredible is that one of the things that makes her burning at the stake so spectacular, I guess, it feels like a weird word, but that's the one that wants to come out, is that number one, she is the only woman to be burned with her book. So it started
they burned them together.
It started with a book burning. And so earlier, so she was burned in 1310, but about 10 years before that, they didn't like her book. They were like, this is heretical.
Gots to go.
And the reason was because she wrote stuff about God, and it was in the vernacular French instead of in Latin. And the idea is so that the everyday person, the lay person, could connect with God, which is love, which is inside, which is accessible all around you. And that was a threat. So they burned her book.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop her. Every time they burned her book, she just wrote it again and then added notes and annotations, and it got bigger every time. And so finally they decided to arrest her and make her recant her book. And she refused. She actually stopped speaking for the last year. And then finally they burned her publicly in Paris. And what people saw, she was so stoic and peaceful and calm that it moved people to tears.
Wow.
They realized that she was like actually pious.
It's tough. I feel like the burning stories, even reading, one of my favorite books about the Beguines is The Wisdom of the Beguines, The Forgotten Story of Medieval Women's Movement by Sister Laura Swan, that I have right here. I kind of skim through the burning stuff. And Rebecca, I don't know, or Rhiannon even, I get like this feeling in my throat. And I'm like, oh, it's a little too close to home, even in, our year of share 2026. It feels very close still. The kind of, I don't know, is it the punishment aspect or the fear? And we're going to talk about the witch wound in our bonus episode. But yeah, any thoughts on that as we're in it?
This is one of those things, I think this about Jesus too, where she clearly has touched the divine. To be able to speak of this idea of like soul annihilation, that you lose part of the process too, that's in her book, is that you lose will, right? Like as you move up, suddenly, like at first you need virtues because you don't know how to act. You don't know how to behave. You don't know what's guiding you. And these things kind of help nudge you in the direction. And then you get to a place where you don't have your own will. You just want God's will. And I mean, really, if you think about it, it's because God's will is your will because you are God, right? And ultimately you're getting to a place where I feel like she was already existing in a place where she was love. Like it didn't matter what was happening or what people said or what people wanted. She was love.
She was so embodied that it didn't.
Yeah, that she was. And one of the quotes from the book I read it and I was like, oh, this is how she could burn so quietly. is that she said, okay, love. Such a soul, says love, swims in the sea of joy that is in the sea of delights, flowing and streaming from the divinity. And she feels no joy, for she herself is joy. And so she swims and flows in joy without feeling any joy, for she dwells in joy and joy dwells in her. For through the power of joy, she is herself joy, which has changed her into itself. Now they have one common will, like fire and flame, and the will of the lover and that of the beloved, for love has changed the soul into itself. And she often described this like divine love, like love is God and God is love. And so when she speaks of love, she's speaking of, which, I mean, from like a cosmological perspective too, a lot of people who have died and talk about their near-death experiences, they say like, oh, everything is love. All there is love. Oh, God is not a person. God is love. And so to me, it feels like she really was connected to that. And so to be in the fire, she was the flame of love.
Well, it's oneness, oneness, whether she's love, joy, fire, water. She was one.
Ooh, and you bring up a really good point, because that's like elemental magic. That's like witch
101.
Being one.
Well, I mean, kind of advanced. Yeah.
But I mean, learning to work with the elements or knowing you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and I think we often think that oneness is a destination. And I think what I would want people to consider or invite them to consider is that you return to it again and again. It's not stagnant. You can't stay one. You have to go out and come back and go out and come back. And I think many of us are taught to seek the destination. And that's just, in my experience, oneness is not a destination.
Ooh.
It's a moment.
Yes, because even this idea, I like to think of religion, and I heard about your experience at seminary. It sounds like you learned lots of different religions. And so I love hearing people's connection with spirit and the places where it overlaps. I'm like, that's important. That's what I need to look into, feel, whatever. And so even this idea of all that was created, when existence became, it couldn't experience itself. And then it split into two. And then the like fractalization of all that is kind of what we are experiencing as ourselves. And when we die, we go back, and then we come back out, and then we go back. And so this idea of being like, I understand that on a like life and death perspective, like big timeline scale. But the way that you're talking about this, Rebecca, is making me see it on a daily level too.
Moment by moment. I don't think I've ever experienced oneness for a whole day, but I certainly have experienced oneness for 5 minutes within a day.
I love that. And that's how you know that it's oneness, because you go back out. Hi, Rhiannon here, just popping in to give you a spiritual tip that's going to enhance and elevate your life. A reading with my co-host, Erin Bagwell. Erin offers mediumship and psychic tarot readings that are perfect for checking in with your spirit guides, getting cosmic messages that apply to your life right now, and seeing who's supporting you on the other side. I personally have had the pleasure of experiencing a reading with Erin, and I was able to connect with my grandparents and my mom, and I got advice that has made it so much easier for me to navigate this chaotic world that we're living in today. You can book appointments right on her website or submit a digital question and get a response back in 48 hours. Check out erin-bagwell.com or click the link in the show notes below to get your reading with Erin today.
Right. Well,
love
the reality is, I mean, we're having a human experience. There's a magnet on my refrigerator. It says we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We can't be spiritually one all the time. We're human. We're messy, just like you said. And so how in the middle of the mess do you return to the center of one? And what practices help us do that?
Yeah, I think that's the work, right? Is remembering, to use your word, Rebecca. Something really interesting about the Beguines is that even though their movement may have been a boom in the Middle Ages, they're actually making a resurgence. And there's a group in Germany of 600 folks who live in genderless apartments and who practice and have a meditation chapel. There are little communities in France and Italy and Switzerland and Bruges. There are a lot of little Beguine communes popping up. So it's becoming something that people are reconnecting to again. And I will tell you a fun fact that I learned during one of these communes. They were living right next door to a church and asked if they could use the church for meditation and, to be in one of these beautiful old chapels. And in a panic, the bishop tore the church down. And so we're still in these moments where the church would rather bring it toppling to the ground than kind of crack its little doors open and explore something different. So I thought that was really fascinating.
I do see glimmers of witches coming back, just like the Beguines. That's a signal to me. Hecate is making a resurgence.
Huge.
Everywhere you go, there's a book about her. She's really making herself known. I just think there's glimmers of the old ways returning in the chaos of the current situation.
I also love that it is these goddesses of destruction that are coming first also. I do have a very strong belief, especially in these times, that there are people bigger than me, entities that are guides, spirits, goddesses. I call on Kali all the time. I love working with Lilith. Hecate, I just started working with because I hear about her everywhere. And there are these entities that can go out and do a lot of work to create space for witches to build while they destroy, to dream like what it could be while the machine eats itself and disappears. Like, I don't need to be a part of, like, sure, I mean, I can be love and accepting and create community and be inclusive and have forgiveness and blah, blah, blah. But also I don't have to solve someone else's problem, which is the patriarchy. I could just focus on creating a solution and having open doors to invite people into it.
Something that I've been thinking a lot about, and this is related and not related, you know, in the news, there's a lot of talk about this Rape Academy, which is, you know, these group of 60 million men who went online and looked at a website about how to sexually assault their wives. And
80 million in March, by the way.
80 million in March. Yeah. Oh, because the publicity. Great. So then, you know, coming off of like the heels of Epstein, and it's like, wow, we're seeing so much of the destruction that women have experienced on a daily life. You know, I don't know one woman who hasn't experienced being harassed or assaulted, right? We're kind of seeing it on this very magnetized level. And I've been just reflecting on my own experience of the divine power within. And I think that our ability to step into the archetype of the witch, for me, is really about like reclaiming power, Rebecca, to go back to your definition, and to really like unlock and unearth and unleash something that's deep within me. And I think we've been so culturally conditioned to be soft and to be quiet and to, you know, put our spirituality behind the walls of these little convents. And it's like now the break is so important. The unleash is so important. And I love the idea of kind of relying on these goddesses and these ancient women to kind of help shepherd us into this new era.
That's beautifully said, Erin. The only good, if you can even say that, is that all of this anger against women has been there forever. It was just underground. And the fact that we can so blatantly see it now is a sign, perhaps, that it is ending. We have uncovered the darkness completely, and it will be what we remember, how we are guided by past powerful women that will help us reclaim that power.
Absolutely. Thinking about marginalized groups, there are so many examples and scholars and historians and sociologists who have experienced this already. I think a lot about the 2016 election. I'm Mexican, and the fact that Trump said so many horrific things about Mexicans and then won, to me, was like a heartbreaking moment of like, I knew people said this stuff. I've had it said to my face. I've been asked, I walked in to make a copy of a key, which is like $1.50. And the person looked at me and said, we only accept American dollars. And I'm like, yes, I'm in California. Like, I live across the street. What is happening? And so, you know, like I've had the experience. I have family members who look more Mexican and have had worse. I've had uncles who've been jumped. You know what I mean? Like, racism is real. We've known that people think certain things about different marginalized groups. People understand what it feels like to be hated, right? And different times in history, they kind of like pop up about who's hated by the dominant group. And we luckily have so many examples of how to move through it. And I think that what's really beautiful too is that here's this group of women, the Beguines, who also at a time were called, a brothel, or, like they were tried to be put in their place, or being the weird people in their family, like they were outsiders to dominant culture or whatever. But that almost didn't matter because they belonged somewhere.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think that there are right now, especially women are having a very visible, like, oh, they hate me. But I'll say what I learned in 2016 is that, like, oh, well, now I can see who I don't have to dance for, because no amount of dancing is going to make them respect me.
I think white women are in a very dangerous place. I mean, we have to own our white supremacy in order for us to then support people of color. And I'm not qualified to talk about this except for in my own work, but I think it's white women who need to be really careful about how we navigate, not careful in terms of our safety, but careful in terms of how we support and become allies to our Black and brown sisters.
And also, I think that there's something about the fact that this is a trauma, like what's happening with this 62 million. I mean, the way that people are posting about this, like people are traumatized. People are traumatized by the Epstein files because it is something that is still a valid, hurtful experience. It hurts to be hated. Mm-hmm. It is really hard to be hated. And so I think that there is something about, like, we have examples of how to navigate this. And if anything, it kind of brings us, there's this opportunity for it to bring us even closer together and navigate through it together, because some people are like a couple steps ahead in terms of having to deal with some of this, like,
I will say from my experience, I was at my neighbor's house a couple of weeks ago when the Epstein files dropped, and I started crying at the dining room table, and our kids are running around, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is so embarrassing. I'm like so emotional. It's like white women haven't really seen themselves in such violent depictions in this way. And I think for me, I was really reckoning with, like I'm the little blonde girls in all of these pictures, and my daughters are in these pictures. Like I felt such a visceral connection. And my neighbor who's Mexican was like, Erin, people of color have been dealing with this since we came to the Americas, since we were here and we got colonized. And so I think it really put into perspective for me, and Rhiannon, what you're saying, it's like there are ways to deal with this and to understand this. And I think my only tip for white women is to just follow women of color, follow queer people, follow the people who've been doing the work, who understand the work, who've processed the trauma, because I feel like there is so much breadth of understanding. And in a way, our perspective is only going to give us so much insight. We need the most marginalized communities to be sharing their stories and to be supporting them so that we can understand. And we can see, because we have blind spots. I have a blind spot as a white woman. So it's a process that we're all kind of sitting with and understanding. But I love this idea that the Beguines, to bring it back to our gals, were this center and this collective of belonging. And, one of the most hurtful stories about the witch that I learned in my research is that, women weren't allowed to talk to each other. If your neighbor got accused of being a witch and you were her best friend, you were next. And so men separated us to make sure we couldn't communicate and talk and lean on one another. And I think if we can learn anything from these women, it's that the power of community is really going to help solve not only our collective trauma, but help heal each other and help move forward and imagine the world with a little more matriarchy.
Yeah, because I think that also, like, it doesn't matter if someone I don't respect hates me. You know what I mean? Because I belong somewhere else. Like, it doesn't matter if this person hates me when I'm isolated, when I'm in survival, then I'm like, I have to dance for everyone or I'm not going to make it. But if I have just like a friend, like it makes it so much easier to be hated, because it's like, well, you don't have to love me. This person does. Or, like the community is such an answer to literally everything we're experiencing right now. I think a lot about this too, because in times like these, I mean, you brought it up about the Beguines as well, that one of the ways that people get through most crises in history is by dancing together and singing together and playing together and just finding like, oh, the world is burning around me. We might as well dance all night. Like, let's listen to disco or whatever. And so there's something about community in dance, even if you're like by yourself around other people dancing feels so good.
We need to have a
It's the
Beguine
rhythm.
inspired dance party now, and set up
Can you make us a
something or other.
playlist?
Yes, we must.
Yes.
We need like some kind of energy to bring us all together. It reminds me of that one quote of that I'm going to butcher about surviving Stonewall and how queer activists protested during the day and then they danced and
Yes,
discoed
at
all
night.
night.
Yeah.
I know, it's so true, but it's because this thing of like, the thing that we have to remember is that we are love, and that the more that we can embody love, I think about this a lot too when I'm stressed out. For like 1 minute, I just want to, like what I have to do or who I want to be doesn't matter. Like, who would I be if I just was if my goal was to be love?
Mm.
And it feels like such a hard pursuit.
One of my favorite books is Witch by Lisa Lister. And in it, she talks about the witch has woken. And there's a Southern author, Sarah Addison Allen. She's from Asheville, North Carolina. And she wrote a book called The Peach Keeper. And this quote is from that. We're connected as women. It's like a spider web. If one part of the web vibrates, if there's trouble, we all know it. But most of the time, we're just too scared or insecure to help. But if we don't help each other, who will?
That reminds me of how trees communicate with each other. And they send, like, if one tree is like lacking nutrients, they'll send nutrients their way.
Yeah.
Well, I think even, Rebecca, that you're working with horses, like I have a theory that women are herd animals. That we're meant to move in groups and go to the bathroom in groups and feel safety in groups. I think us being isolated. I think the Beguines had something here with us being in community and living together and being together.
And I lived on the Oregon coast in a community that had a herd of about 250 elk, and the women all stay together. The men are separate, except for at mating time.
Well,
But
that's the same for bees, elephants.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty common. The bonobos are most closely, ancestored monkey cousins. Like that's how, people have been doing it.
Yeah.
It sounds fun,
I love it.
Then the men have to come in and like do their little dance. And then it's like, oh, fine, I'll pay attention to you or whatever. Impress me because I'm busy with my friends.
Yes, that's right.
Guys, this has been such a gorgeous episode. Rebecca, we went in all different places, and I feel like I'm gonna re-listen to this like again and again for my own calming and alignment and remembering my purpose. So thank you for being here. Can you let people know where they can find you and what's going on with Voices in the River?
Well, thanks so much. It was fun. And I just learned so much. You can find me at Rebecca Auman, AUMAN.com. And I offer all sorts of healing and intuitive coaching. And Voices in the River has been produced by Theo Balcom, and she just got another job, which I'm very happy for her. I'm in transition, so I'm not really sure what's next with Voices in the River, but I invite folks to listen. I think there's women's voices. We really are celebrating women's voices of all kind to help with intuition and power and magic.
I love it. Well, Hidden History of Magic listeners can join us in either the Patreon or Apple subscriptions. We're going to dive deeper now into the witch wound. Rebecca is going to pull some cards for us, and we're going to do a little magic. So please join us over there. All right. Thanks, guys. Check out a sneak peek of our bonus episode dropping this Friday.
And I really learned that I had to get comfortable with the fire to help others sit in the fire.
That's my dream. All I want to do is have the borrowers come out and do my laundry. Every day I talk to the gnomes and I'm like, anybody want to help? Please.
Yeah. But for me, I see the witch wound most clearly probably in the story of Eve.
To the healed state of brilliance is this piece of poetry that I'm going to carry with me because that's beautiful.
And when I'm that afraid, I know that it's the key to the next step.
We're both crying now.
Wow. Thank you so much for listening to the Hidden History of Magic. If you like the show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. This show is produced by Rhiannon Hauk and Aaron Bagwell. A very special thanks to our patrons who make this podcast possible.
To join our coven of gorgeous witches, get bonus episodes, attend live events, and learn real magic inspired by each episode, join us on Patreon.
If you would like your own personal reading from Rhiannon or Aaron, check out our links in the show notes. Until next time.